Hello, beekeepers. It's Jim Tew, recording a few notes for my bee culture article for January 2021, the first of the new year. Ironically, I chose a topic that isn't really particularly suitable for January, but the older I get, the more the seasons become more and more inconsequential. But I extracted some late season honey. And as I was doing that, I kept notes, I kept my thoughts about this whole honey extracting and processing requirement that we as beekeepers do. And I realized that really processing honey, bottling honey, labeling honey, all the things that liquid honey requires, in many instances, any honey requires, is not really related to beekeeping. So any concerns I might have about controlling varroa, wondering why I paid so much money for a queen that's not doing anything, that really isn't immediately comparable to plumbing a honey extracting line, to getting the right extension cord and switches set up, to getting the plastic covering down on the floor. You know, there's entire companies who do nothing more than just process honey, especially liquid honey. And they do that without a beehive anywhere in the general area. It's a specialty aspect of beekeeping. So is queen production. So is commercial pollination. So is package production. It's interesting that package producers really don't want a nectar flow, because when they're trying to shake packages and they're shaking out all that nectar, it makes the bees all wet and gummy. So they're quite happy having no nectar flow at all. And then they'll buy tanker load lots of sugar syrup to feed to the bees as they want them to have food stores. So this whole honey thing not really being beekeeping isn't particularly unusual. It happens in other areas. Equipment supply people don't necessarily have beehives. They just sell equipment to those people who do, but they don't really keep bees. So what's your point, Jim? My point is this whole honey processing thing is a lot of work. Now, part of the reason I wrote is because of me personally. At other times in my life, I was responsible and had access to beautiful honey processing facilities with pumps and filters and heated sumps and multiple extractors and loading docks. I had it all, and I retired. I had it all go away. So when I extract honey now, I'm a lot like every other beekeeper. You got to get the extractor down, you got to set the thing up, you got to worry about it wobbling, which I spent a lot of time on. Extractors are going to wobble, and no one's come up with a good way to stop that from happening. Get it all set up, get the bees out of the supers, bring the supers in, warm the honey, it just goes on and on and on, doesn't it? So I really spent about 2,000 words doing a little more than complaining about the spectacular mess that honey processing brings about. Inevitably. I just don't care how neat you are. If you process enough honey, you're going to lose control of it. It's just by its nature. I may or may not go back and add it to the article, but one of the thoughts I had that is just nonsensical is, isn't it a great thing that honey is water soluble? Think what a mess honey would have caused if it had the persistence of beeswax and propolis. One of the biggest headaches with honey extracting and processing is getting cappings on the floor, on your shoes, grinding those wax cappings into the cement floor, and then trying something to get that wax off the floor. It is really remarkably persistent stuff, as is propolis. But honey, if you have hot water works beautifully. Clean it up, cut it, dissolve it, send it on its way. So we lucked out in that regard. I spent time this month, January 2021, talking about the consideration, the realities. I made the comment, I'm not trying to write an expose. I'm not exposing some big secret about this whole honey thing, other than the fact that this is just work. But when all is said and done, that honey begins to flow into that bucket. And when I get that honey cleaned up and get it filtered and get it in that quart jar, at that point, it seems to have been worth it. It seems to have been worth it. I mean, it's a beautiful product. It's a wholesome product. It's an interesting product. It just took a lot of work to get it to that point. I've begun to work with Kim Flottam and Jeff Ott at Growing Planet Media. We're going to be producing a podcast be called Honeybee Obscura. Be called what? It'll be called Honeybee Obscura with Kim and Jim. And what we'd like to do on that podcast is to discuss anything about beekeeping we want to discuss. Kim uses 8-frame equipment. I use 10-frame equipment. Why? Well, we'll talk about it. Should I really pay all that much money for a queen, or just thought about any queen, a queen? We'll talk about it. So the thing we'd like to discuss are the things that makes beekeepers beekeeping. And we're going to do it for just a short burst, 10 to 20 minutes, short thing. We're setting that up, and I introduced that briefly in the article for January 2021. Just discussing what we'll be doing on that. If you want to follow that, if you are a podcast listener, you can check it out and see as we're progressing on getting the first episodes out at Growing Planet Media. They basically have Beekeeping Today is what it's called. Beekeeping Today at Growing Planet Media. That's where it'll be posted. So I mentioned a lot of that too. So as I did in my last paragraph of the article, I apologized for if I sounded negative or whatever. I never mean to sound negative, but I do mean to complain about things that should be complained about. Why do queens cost so much? And why is the quality still sometimes uncertain? Why do I have so much trouble controlling swarms? Why did apparently I accidentally kill a colony with my oxalic fumigation technique? So I'll complain about these things in these articles. And then the last paragraph, I usually try to explain that my complaints don't mean that I have in any way less of a complete and pure love for beekeeping. I appreciate you watching what I'm doing here, and I appreciate you reading the article. I truly do. Thank you. I hope to see you next month. Jim Q telling you bye-bye.